You are not broke because you are lazy. You are not broke because you make bad decisions. You are not broke because you lack discipline or ambition or the basic intelligence required to manage money. You are broke, or closer to broke than you should be given how hard you work, because nobody ever sat you down and explained how the system you are living inside of actually functions. Not your parents, not your school, not the HR representative who handed you your first benefits package and pointed to the 401k enrollment form without explaining what any of it meant. Nobody. And the gap between what you were taught about money and what you actually needed to know is not small. It is the entire distance between where you are right now and where you assumed you would be by this point in your life. This is that explanation. The setup. You grew up in a country that generates more wealth than any economy in human history. The United States produces approximately $27 trillion in GDP annually. That number is so large, it has no intuitive meaning. What it means in practical terms is that the machinery of wealth creation in this country is extraordinarily productive. You were not taught how that machinery works. You were taught how to be an input into it. 12 or more years of formal education and not one class covered compound interest in a way that connected to your actual life. Not one class explained the difference between an asset and a liability in terms you could apply to a decision you would face at 23. Not one class walked you through what a W-2 versus a 1099 means for your tax exposure, or why the person who owns the building you work in is accumulating wealth faster than you are, even though you are the one doing the work. You were taught to get good grades so you could get a good job, so you could earn a good salary. The salary was presented as the destination. Nobody mentioned that the salary is actually the starting point, and only if you know what to do with it. The paycheck trap. You get paid. The money arrives in your checking account, and before you have made a single conscious decision, it begins to leave. Rent or mortgage, utilities,
car payment, insurance, subscriptions you forgot you had, groceries, gas, the minimum payment on the credit card that has been at the same balance for 3 years because the minimum payment covers the interest and almost nothing else. By the time you have covered the basics, the paycheck is mostly gone. What remains feels like yours. You spend it on the things that make a difficult month livable. A dinner out, a streaming service, something you needed, and something you wanted, and something you bought at 11 p.m. because your phone showed it to you, and the shipping was free. At the end of the month, you look at the account. There is less than you expected. There is always less than you expected. You tell yourself next month will be different. Next month is not different, because the structure of next month is identical to the structure of this month. This is not a discipline problem. This is an architecture problem. The architecture of your financial life was built by default, by the order in which bills arrive and habits form, not by any conscious design. And a financial architecture built by default will produce a default outcome, which is exactly where most Americans find themselves. The median American household has less than $8,000 in savings. Not investments, savings. The liquid cash available to absorb an emergency without going into debt. $8,000 in the wealthiest country in human history. That number is not an accident. It is the predictable output of a system that was never
designed to help you accumulate capital. It was designed to keep you spending. The spending machine. Every major industry in the American economy is organized around one goal: capturing as much of your paycheck as possible before you can convert it into anything permanent. The credit card industry charges you 24% annual interest on balances you carry because the minimum payment system was specifically engineered to keep balances alive indefinitely. You pay every month. The balance does not move. The bank earns interest on money you already spent, on things you no longer have. The auto industry sells you a depreciating asset on a financing structure that costs you thousands in interest over the life of the loan for a vehicle that loses 20% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. The average American car payment is over $700 a month. That is $8,400 a year flowing out of your account into an asset that is worth less every single day you own it. The housing market, in the major metropolitan areas where most economic opportunity exists, has become structurally inaccessible to first-time buyers at median income levels. The down payment requirement alone, typically 20% of a purchase price that in many cities exceeds $500,000, represents more money than most Americans have saved in their entire lives. The people who already own property accumulate equity. The people who cannot afford to buy continue paying rent that builds equity for someone else. The subscription economy extracts money from your account in amounts small enough that you do not notice any individual charge, but large enough that the aggregate, if you added it up, would shock you. The average American spends over $200 a month on subscriptions. Many do not know how many subscriptions they have. The companies that provide them know exactly how many you have and exactly how long it has been since you used each one. None of these systems are illegal. None of them are secret. They are simply optimized, designed by people who understood exactly how money moves and built structures that ensure it moves toward them.
The wealth gap is a knowledge gap. Here's the thing that the financial content industry consistently gets wrong. The wealth gap in America is not primarily an income gap. It is a knowledge gap that produces a behavior gap that compounds over decades into an outcome gap. Two people can earn identical salaries and end up in completely different financial positions 20 years later, not because one was luckier or worked harder, but because one understood three things the other did not. The first thing is the difference between consuming money and deploying it. Consuming money means spending it on things whose value disappears at the point of purchase. Meals, entertainment, depreciating goods, experiences. Deploying money means converting it into assets that generate returns. Index funds, real estate, ownership stakes in businesses. Both feel like spending in the moment. One builds a balance sheet. One does not. The second thing is how compound interest actually works from the inside, not as a concept, as a lived experience applied to real numbers over real time. If you invest $400 a month starting at 22 and earn a 7% average annual return, you will have approximately $1.1 million at 62. If you start at 32, you will have approximately $510,000. The 10 years you waited cost you $590,000. Not because you invested less, the monthly amount is identical, but because the first 10 years of compounding produced returns that then compounded on themselves for the following 30 years. Time is the variable that money cannot replace, and nobody told you that when you were 22. The third thing is the difference between net worth and
income. Income is what arrives in your account. Net worth is the difference between what you own and what you owe. A person earning $200,000 a year with $300,000 in debt and no assets has a lower net worth than a person earning $60,000 a year who has spent 5 years building a modest investment portfolio and paying down debt. The high earner feels wealthy. The math says otherwise. Wealth is not how much you make. Wealth is what you keep and what you build with what you keep. The first moves. You cannot fix a system you do not understand. But once you understand it, the first moves are not complicated. They are uncomfortable because they require changing behavior that has been the default for years, but they are not complicated. The first move is paying yourself before you pay everything else. Not saving what is left at the end of the month, because what is left at the end of the month is nothing. Moving a fixed amount, even $100, even $50, into a separate account the moment your paycheck arrives, before your brain registers it as available. The amount matters less than the automation. Automate it and the decision is made once. Leave it discretionary and you will make the decision again every month, and you will lose most of those decisions to the immediate demands of a life that always costs exactly as much as you earn. The second move is understanding what your debt is actually costing you. Not the monthly payment, the total cost over the life of the balance.
A $5,000 credit card balance at 24% interest, paid at the minimum rate, will take over 15 years to pay off and cost you more than $7,000 in interest. The $5,000 purchase cost you $12,000. Once you see that number clearly, the minimum payment becomes a different kind of decision. The third move is starting. Not when you make more, not when the debt is gone, not when things settle down. Now, with whatever you have. A $50 monthly investment in a low-cost index fund opened today is worth more than the $500 monthly investment you will start when conditions are perfect, because conditions are never perfect. And the 22-year-old version of you who had time on their side is gone. And every month you wait, the math gets slightly worse. You are not behind because you failed. You are behind because you were never given the map. The system was not designed to explain itself to you. It was designed to run on your participation, whether or not you understood what you were participating in. Now you understand it. The next move is yours.